Clint Barton's Hawkeye is one of the most underrated Marvel heroes of all time, but there's more to him than meets the eye. In this video, we're going to dive deep into the layers of the Hawkeye iceberg, like how his MCU origin differs from his comic book origin. So sit back and grab your popcorn because this is about to get interesting. In this first layer, we're going to talk about Hawkeye and his overarching role in the MCU. A S.H.I.E.L.D. agent turned into an original member of the Avengers, Clint Barton has quite the resume. Hawkeye first made his appearance as a cameo in the first Thor movie, where he was called into action to take out the Asgardian from taking Mjolnir in the desert. He didn't end up taking a shot on Thor, let alone would it have had any effect on the god, but it gave us an insight as an audience that this guy with the arrow is more than he appears. Moving forward in the Infinity Saga, Hawkeye is given the task to guard the Tesseract at the beginning of the Avengers film after his small encounter with the world of Asgardians. He was sent to a facility in Nevada as a part of Project Pegasus, where he was able to observe the MCU's Tesseract, which ultimately allowed him to play a huge role in the first group film. Now, for most of this film, Hawkeye did pose a threat to his allies, as Loki used his scepter to put Clint under his control. He actually caused some difficulty for his friends, which I'll dive deep into a bit later in this video. Once he is released from Loki's control, Hawkeye is seen kicking some major butt in the Battle of New York, despite only having a bow and some nifty arrows. This went to show why he deserved a spot on the Avengers roster and why he was valued by Nick Fury as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. With his accuracy and agility as an archer, he's not a hero you really want to mess with. I mean, look at Oliver Queen as the Green Arrow. He's basically the DC counterpart to Hawkeye, but I don't see people underestimating him. After the first Avengers film, Hawkeye was seen in Avengers Age of Ultron, Captain America Civil War, Avengers Endgame, and most recently in the Hawkeye series. And no, he was not in Avengers Infinity War due to the past events of Captain America Civil War, where he was on house arrest after breaking the Sokovia Accords, just like Ant-Man was. This was made up for as he played an intricate role throughout Endgame, and he even opened up the movie with his family disappearing in the blip in the first scene. Once the battle with Thanos ended, Hawkeye retired to be with his family because the guy has morals and is a family man through and through. This went sideways when Kate Bishop brought back his Ronin suit in the Hawkeye series, and he had to go back to the field to fix the situation. While it wasn't a solo movie and the idea of a Christmas-themed Hawkeye show seemed odd at first, Hawkeye's show suited Jeremy Renner's character well and even showcased him as a true mentor and leader. He's actually the first member of the original Avengers to teach one of the new upcoming heroes of the MCU the ways of being an Avenger. Now, to be fair, Iron Man and Black Widow are checked out, Cap is MIA, Thor is with the Guardians of the Galaxy at the time, and the Hulk is drinking at his homemade tiki bar. So I guess Clint's the only one with the time to be a mentor to a kid, right?
Look, I know it doesn't look like that right now, but you'd be lost without me, you realize that?
Now that I went through the basics and laid out the groundwork for Hawkeye, let's go down a layer and focus on who he is as a person and how his origins compare between the MCU and the comics. As I stated earlier, Clint Barton is a family man. He has values that the other Avengers can't really relate to because of their superhuman origin stories, and that's okay. This makes Hawkeye more unique than bland compared to his bright-colored costume colleagues, where his motives and ideals are fueled by more personal aspects of life. Despite doing dangerous work and fighting off cosmic threats, Clint Barton maintains a healthy marriage with his wife Laura. She was also a member of S.H.I.E.L.D. at one point, but is no longer working and takes care of their children while Clint goes off doing Avenger things. They are one of the only successful relationships seen in the MCU, and their marriage is built on trust and understanding one another. There may be more prominent love interests in the film franchise, but none are as pure as this relationship. Moving on to his kids, Clint will do anything to make sure they are safe. I mean, we saw what happened in Endgame when he went rogue as the Ronin in order to find out what happened to his family. He will go to great lengths to make sure he doesn't lose anyone important to him. Cooper, Lila, and Nathaniel are important to him, and that is truly shown in the Hawkeye series when he sends them home at the first sight of danger. Even though he is married and has 3 children, none of his colleagues knew about them until Avengers Age of Ultron. Clint keeps their existence a secret and makes sure their home is in a remote and isolated location so that they can be as safe as possible when he isn't around. This is something I want to touch upon at the end of the video because I think this plays a huge role in how Hawkeye is sort of the secret glue to the group. Another moral aspect of Hawkeye is that he's willing to do what it takes to protect anyone in danger. He comes out of retirement to help Kate Bishop clean up the mess she started, even though he was supposed to be spending time with his family for Christmas. Sure, this counteracts the being there for his family mantra a bit, but it just shows you how much of a good heart he has. This even leads up to a powerful moment in the Hawkeye finale where he stops fighting Yelena and offers his life in order to give Yelena closure about Natasha's death. It's an emotional moment between the two once Hawkeye does the secret whistle Yelena and Natasha shared as sisters, making Yelena realize that Clint truly did care for Natasha. While he is an Avenger, Clint isn't the flashy kind of hero as I mentioned before, and this is also touched upon in the Hawkeye series. Kate explains to Clint that he needs to sell his role as Hawkeye more in order to gain more attention. Part of his reply and response was,
"What am I selling? It's certainly not Halloween costumes and toys off the shelf."
And the Wall Street Journal actually explained that this seems to be reflective of the Disney Store, where the amount of Hawkeye toys is far less than the amount of Captain America toys available. It's funny though because he doesn't care about selling his image and talks about how he tries not to be seen to make his job easier. It was never about fame or glory to him, but rather about doing the right thing for the greater good. Now his comic book origin is far different than his MCU origin story. In the comics, Hawkeye was actually trained by the swordsman and trick shot as a young boy when he was part of a circus. You know, the usual kind of origin story. He also was seen as a criminal at first due to a little misinterpretation from Iron Man, but he was able to clear his name and become a hero. In the MCU, Hawkeye isn't seen as a criminal, and he wasn't trained in the circus from what we know. In some deleted scenes from Hawkeye, you can see that he was being taught how to steal from people by his mom. Don't you love mother-son bonding time by committing crimes together? Me too!
Probably not a good idea.
It could be assumed that S.H.I.E.L.D. is the reason Hawkeye became who he is in the MCU, but I'll leave that up to you. It's also important to know that Hawkeye isn't a family man in the comics, and he doesn't have any kids. He does get married, but it's nothing as romantic as he and Laura are in the MCU. The comic book version is also more rebellious than Jeremy Renner's character. It's also safe to say that the comic book version is a lot flashier than the MCU version. Sure, Clint got an upgrade in his show, but it wasn't anything too out there. Diving a bit deeper into the world of Hawkeye, I'd like to go over his role as a leader moving forward in the MCU. I know that there are heroes in the multiverse saga like Sam Wilson's Captain America, Ant-Man, Shang-Chi, Captain Marvel, and so forth who are more than capable of leading the next group of Avengers. Personally, I think it should be Hawkeye, and Jeremy Renner seems to have the same thoughts. In an interview back in 2021, Jeremy Renner talked about how Hawkeye was the head of the West Coast Avengers in the comics, and that it would be neat to see his MCU character be in that sort of Captain America leader role. This answer of his all came about when the interviewer said that Hawkeye has been underutilized in the MCU, which is absolutely true. Just because he can't climb walls, conjure magic, or build high-tech suits doesn't mean he isn't a great superhero. Clint Barton is underrated, and I will admit, I was one of the Hawkeye haters in the beginning. I didn't care for him because he didn't stand out compared to the other heroes earlier on. But now that I am totally mature and can do my own wash now as a 23-year-old, I have much more respect for the Archer. Don't judge me.
Whoa, too much information.
I think that's what made Hawkeye so belittled compared to the other Avengers at the beginning of the Infinity Saga. When the first Avengers movie came out, my age group, who I believe is the main audience of the MCU, was around 12 years old at the time. We wanted to see the Hulk get angry and Captain America throw his shield around. We didn't care for the guy that could shoot a bow and arrow because it wasn't cool to our rotten teenage brains. Now that we're older, I think it's easier for us to relate to Hawkeye because he has more of a human side to him since he doesn't really have a superpower. He just wants to be a dad and keep his family safe. What's not to love? Kind of branching off the underrated argument here, I think it's important to know some of the characters he has defeated over time. The first one I want to talk about occurred in the MCU where Hawkeye anticipates Wanda Maximoff's hypnosis move in Age of Ultron and neutralizes her before she can make her move on him. This goes to show that there is no way this man is the worst Avenger. Tony Stark, Thor, and Captain America couldn't even stop her before being influenced by her magic. The big three failed where Hawkeye actually succeeded. In the comics, there are some characters he's defeated or neutralized that might shock you. When being framed for a crime, Hawkeye is chased by Captain America, but is able to outmaneuver Steve and shoot a taser arrow into his friend's chest. Hawkeye was willing to play hard where Cap wasn't. In Avengers Thunderbolts number 6, Hawkeye actually takes out Vision. Yeah, the super android who still has yet to be found after the events of WandaVision? That guy. Clint shoots him with a special arrow that disrupts Vision's android body and damages him a pretty decent amount. This goes to show that Clint doesn't need to fight his foe one-on-one. He just needs to find the best way to take them out as quickly as possible. And being a good shot with a bow and arrow definitely helps him. As we near the abyss with the 4th layer, I just want to say thanks for sticking around. I'm sure when you saw this thumbnail you thought, ew, Hawkeye. But I hope now you have a better appreciation for the guy. A huge turning point in Hawkeye's MCU storyline comes with Black Widow's sacrifice on Vormir in Avengers Endgame. The two have been through a lot together, from Budapest to fighting aliens from space, so needless to say, this was one of the more climactic moments of the film. One thing I want to go into here is how things would be different in the MCU if Hawkeye gave his life and Black Widow returned with the Soul Stone instead. If this were to have happened, it would have been a great redemption arc for Hawkeye after becoming a rogue assassin during the blip. He murdered a lot of people, and sacrificing himself for the fate of the world would have been a meaningful end for his story. Another thing to think about is Kate Bishop. If Hawkeye wasn't around, who would have taken Kate under their wing to mentor her? It's very possible that Kate still could have found the Ronin suit and ended up getting in bigger trouble than she already was if Hawkeye wasn't there to step in. Maybe she wouldn't even become an Avenger in the future. If Black Widow were alive, she could have been a part of a new MCU solo trilogy. It was disappointing to me personally that her solo movie just felt like a filler movie and didn't touch upon her childhood and past as much as I wanted it to. I think if Hawkeye took the fall in Endgame, Natasha could have had more solo projects that focused on her journey because she was also an underdeveloped character throughout the Infinity Saga. She had a decent role in Iron Man 2 and obviously she's in every Avengers movie, but you just didn't get to go deep into her character as much as I would have liked. Also, if Black Widow were still with us, she could have been a potential leader for the new set of Avengers in the Multiverse Saga. She is also an original Avenger, like Hawkeye, and she holds a great leadership mindset. Perhaps Yelena wouldn't be a part of the Thunderbolts if Natasha were here. There are so many different timelines that could occur if Hawkeye died in Endgame, so let's just breathe a bit before really going down that rabbit hole. It's likely that Hawkeye will be seen in Avengers: The Kang Dynasty and Avengers: Secret Wars, as he has been in every Avengers movie except Infinity War. There is also a possibility that Hawkeye makes an appearance in the Echo series with his connection to the character from his series. Hawkeye could also get a season 2 for his show, but I don't see that happening. While this isn't announced yet, he could be in a Young Avengers project as a mentor for the younger group of heroes. It would be neat to see him as a leader to a group of kids, as we have already seen him teach Kate Bishop how to be a hero. A big theory is that he could be in the Thunderbolts film because in the comics, Hawkeye actually led the group for quite some time. Crazy to think about, I know. But there is that connection to Yelena now in the MCU, so why not let Clint have a cameo there? Sadly, all of these possibilities are dependent on the health of Jeremy Renner, after the snowplow accident he was in at the beginning of the year. He seems to be doing great with therapy and rehab, which is so wonderful to hear. Last but not least, the dark and scary part of the iceberg, Layer 5. As I mentioned earlier, I've grown in appreciation for Hawkeye and who he is in the MCU. While most think he is the weakest Avenger, I think it's possible that he's actually the strongest Avenger. Don't tell Thor or Hulk I said that.
Strongest Avenger.
Access denied.
Think about all that I've talked about so far in this video. What motivates Clint to go on his missions, all of the morals and values he holds, his mindset of being a hero and not a product to sell, and so on. He's one of the more well-rounded superheroes of the MCU, and his lack of superhuman abilities makes him more real and relatable. When the Avengers found out about Hawkeye's family in Age of Ultron, it was hard for them to comprehend how a fellow Avenger could have and manage a family while saving the world, especially since most of the other Avengers don't have normal lives due to their previous experiences and superpowers. This is great though because it shows the Avengers what they're truly fighting for families like Clint's. Without them, there would be nothing to fight for, really. To top it all off, Hawkeye inspired Wanda to become an Avenger in Age of Ultron. His little speech shows he can be consoling, inspiring, and determined, all while fighting robots in a flying city.
And I have a bow and arrow.
He shows the most important aspect of being a hero, and that's being human. And that's what makes him stand out compared to the other Avengers. And there you have it. An in-depth look into Hawkeye and his role as a superhero in the world of Marvel. What are your personal thoughts on Hawkeye? Do you think he is underrated and consider him one of the strongest Avengers? Let us know in the comments down below. Until next time, just remember to cut Hawkeye some slack.